I'm Katherine Gypson for AM Insight. Today I'm here with C. Holland Taylor, founder and president of the LibForAll Foundation, an organization that promotes religious liberty and tolerance in Indonesia and around the world. Mr. Taylor, thank you so much for joining me today.
Nice to be with you.
The LibForAll Foundation has its roots in the life of its co-founder, President Gus Dur, Indonesia's first democratically elected president. Can you tell me why Gus Dur's presidency came at such a key moment in the development of Indonesia's religious and civil freedoms?
Well, Indonesia lived through over 50 years of dictatorship under Presidents Sukarno and Suharto. And during the last 15 years of President Suharto's reign, Gus Dur, Kiai Haji Abdurrahman Wahid, was the head of the Nahdlatul Ulama, the largest Muslim organization in the world with 40 million members. And he very deliberately used his 15-year term as head of the NU in order to develop Muslim civil society, in order to develop an understanding of Islam as a peace with itself in the modern world, and actually to undermine the dictatorship of Suharto, but then also to lay the foundation for a politics practiced by Muslims, which was not an Islamist politics, not a politics aimed at supremacy for any one group within society, but rather introducing the full range of civil and economic liberties associated with a modern democratic state.
President Wahid once wrote that all too many Muslims fail to grasp Islam, and he specifically referred to a verse in the Qur'an that says, "For you, your religion, for me, my religion." What is the LibForAll Foundation doing to help Muslims grasp this concept of Islam?
We are working in multiple strands. We build counter-extremist networks. In Islamic terms, we're building a global Rahmatan lil Alamin network. It's a phrase from the Qur'an which refers to the Prophet Muhammad and Islam as being a blessing for all creation. And the network that we are building involves top Muslim leaders in the field of religion, education, pop culture, government, business, and the mass media. And we are executing programs. We have a media division, and we are empowering moderate Muslims, Muslims who actually have a profoundly tolerant and spiritual understanding of their faith, to speak out and use technology in order to communicate with others, use the media, and then mutually reinforce one another. So that, interestingly enough, is normally pop stars do not work with theologians, and people who are in the media do not necessarily engage with pop stars to promote a pluralistic understanding of Islam. And yet we bring these different elements together, and we bring them in innovative ways that attract mass attention and then create a contrast in people's minds. One of the very prominent project we had a number of years ago was contrasting Laskar Jihad, a group that's known as the Warriors of Jihad, who were involved in the massacre of approximately 10,000 people in Southeast Asia, contrasting that with the concept of Laskar Cinta, the Warriors of Love. The top rock star in Muslim Southeast Asia, a man named Ahmad Dhani, who's associated with LibForAll, launched 2 albums and had 3 #1 hits based on this concept. And basically everybody, because of his fame and because of the controversy that had surrounded the existence of this terrorist group, virtually every Muslim had in Indonesia and Southeast Asia had to ask, is my concept of Islam one in which I consider myself a warrior of jihad in a violent supremacist manner, or a warrior of love whose responsibility in this life is to be an agent of mercy, compassion, and kindness to others?
So LibForAll has these projects that are working to change Muslims' perceptions of their own religion. I'm curious, do you have projects that work to change Western perceptions of Islam?
We do, and very early in the article that you quoted from President Wahid that was in the Wall Street Journal, he was talking about a crisis of misunderstanding regarding Islam, which exists in both the Muslim and the non-Muslim world. And it's a crisis of misunderstanding in which there are Muslims who feel that religion obliges them to engage in acts of violence motivated by a sense of supremacy and hatred. But then likewise, you have in the West a widespread belief among many Westerners that this is the true Islam, that this is the sum total of Islamic teachings, and any good Muslim adheres to such beliefs as reflected in the front page news stories in our papers every day. So this mutual misunderstanding regarding Islam leads to a constant ratcheting up of suspicion, hatred, violence in the world. In LibForAll Foundation, we're in the process of executing a long-term strategy to inform, educate, encourage, and empower both Muslims and non-Muslims alike to be part of a global network which can strengthen the forces of moderation within Islam, transform people's understanding of Islam in order to achieve the long-term goal, which is the global triumph of a pluralistic and tolerant understanding of Islam that's at peace with itself in the modern world.
Moving back to Indonesia, I know that the Indonesian courts recently upheld a law prohibiting blasphemy, and this is something that President Wahid had led a constitutional challenge against. I'm wondering what so concerned him about this law, and what was your reaction when you found out it had been upheld?
I was not surprised, because in Indonesia, while the situation is not as dire as in many parts of the Muslim world, nevertheless there is a heavy degree of politicization of Islam and infiltration of radical Muslims into government and all aspects of civil society. And they wish to impose a monolithic understanding of Islam upon everyone. And blasphemy laws do not simply impact non-Muslims, they impact Muslims. As President Wahid once was asked, he was visiting the United States with me 2 years ago. We were at an Indonesian mosque in Queens, and he was asked about his opposition to the laws, these blasphemy laws, and he was by an Indonesian in New York. And he said, "Why are you always defending these minorities, and why are you opposing the blasphemy law?" And President Wahid said, "Because, one, I believe in the Constitution, the Indonesian Constitution, which guarantees freedom of religion, and two, because as soon as the extremists succeed in extinguishing religious freedom for minority A or B or C, they will be proceeding to extinguish our religious freedom as well." He used a phrase in Indonesian which encompassed everyone in the room, because the objective of those who support this kind of legislation is ultimately to ram a monolithic understanding of Islam down the throats of everyone within society.
You have more than 4 decades of experience studying and working in the Middle East and Indonesia. Curious, do you see Indonesia moving in a promising direction in terms of religious freedom, despite the blasphemy law being upheld?
What I would say about Indonesia, and what I would say, it exists within a global context. I was in Pakistan decades ago, and the situation in Pakistan back then was very similar to the situation in Indonesia today. What I mean by that is there was much greater degree of freedom of thought, movement, expression in Pakistan at that time. And Pakistan has gone very severely downhill in a period of 3 decades. Now this is part of a global phenomenon. It's a process of, we could say, the Wahhabization of Muslim thought throughout the world, the radicalization of Muslim thought throughout the world. And Indonesia is not isolated from this global phenomenon. So I look at Indonesia as we could see, perhaps historically, looking at Britain in World War II. And the way I look at this, there is a struggle going on within the Muslim world. The Muslim leaders that we work with, that are part of, that are really the backbone of LibForAll Foundation, recognize that the spread of extremist views, extremist ideology, represents an existential threat to the continuance of a pluralistic and spiritual understanding of Islam everywhere in the world, because it's a primary target of extremist ideology, to annihilate all forms of divergence or opposition to their ideology, which is a politicized ideology, but using religion to justify the acquisition of political power. Now, Indonesia represents the largest society on earth with a self-confident majority of Muslims who have a profoundly pluralistic and tolerant understanding of Islam, who understand the Qur'an, the Sunnah, the traditions of Islamic jurisprudence very well, and who are not intimidated by radical accusations that they are somehow deviant in their understanding. So what I see in Indonesia is that Indonesia is up for grabs. It's in the middle of a global conflict, and the outcome of that conflict within Indonesia and will influence significantly the outcome of this struggle for the soul of Islam in the world at large.
Well, thank you so much for joining me here today, Mr. Taylor. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.